And welcome back to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, where we're coming to you with the continued coverage following CERAWeek by S&P Global, where the conversations around digital transformation in the energy sector reached a new level of urgency. This year, one thing was clear: AI is no longer experimental, it's operational, and it's reshaping how plants are run and how they train operators and how to secure their critical infrastructure. And does the industry scale industry performance across entire platforms? Joining me today is someone at the center of this transformation, Jason Urso, who is Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Honeywell Industrial Automation. Now, Jason is a 33-year veteran at Honeywell, who also leads more than 2,000 engineers and innovators building the next generation of industrial automation technologies. And Jason and his team recently launched Honeywell's AI-powered control room assistant, part of a broader push towards automation operation, advanced OT cybersecurity, and high ROI AI deployment across the oil and gas, chemicals, refining, minery, and power. So today, I'm going to dive into all of this pertaining to AI, and we're going to try to move it from pilot to profit, and how the control rooms are being redefined and what it means for the future industrial workforce. Jason, welcome to the Energy Mixx Radio Show.
It's really great to be here and look forward to the discussion today.
Well, our listeners are from all different ends of the spectrum. We have listeners that are also veterans in the oil and gas industry, but I have to say that artificial intelligence is the buzz everywhere. And of course, it was buzzing at CERAWeek. But it's really hard for someone who's outside of this automation world, maybe a mid-sized service company, a smaller oil and gas company, or even somebody just mainstream, because we are a radio show, to really understand how evolved AI has become in the oil and gas sector. So I want to start with scaling across multiple, plant operations. It used to be everything was segmented. And if something broke down, they really didn't have an understanding that it was going to break down, when it was going to break down. A lot of the different rooms and stuff didn't talk to each other. It was very much like an old office space where you have HR, and then you have, the operations part, and then you have the managers. It has been similar. But now with artificial intelligence, everything has gone completely where everybody's talking in the way of a system, an operation. So let me ask you, Honeywell has emphasized that the biggest wins that come when AI scales across portfolios, not just a single asset. That's what we're talking about, these silos. Based on your experience, what organizational or regulatory barriers most commonly stall at scale up? And then how do they lead? How do leading operators overcome them? So maybe we can start with a little bit of a ramp up if you want, to kind of help the listeners understand. I said it very quickly. You might be able to help the listeners understand in a different way, that everything is going really quick, being all one thing, all connected. And you guys are a part of that, of helping that happen.
Yeah, sure. Let me maybe start with why use AI and what is the role of AI, and then build up to how do you get it at scale. So first important question is that in the world of industrial automation, we are a very deterministic science, meaning that for a set of inputs, we have a very defined set of outputs, and that's how we run control within a process plant. So it leads one to conclude, well, why would you use artificial intelligence in a world which you have to be very deterministic? How does probabilistic science play in that role? Well, if you sit back and think about how many human-based decisions actually happen within a plant environment, what to make, when to make it, what to fix, when to fix it, and realize that human decision making is very probabilistic unto itself. So you get variations between humans with lesser experience versus humans with greater experience. Plants with the best skilled personnel tend to perform better than other sites. So now you realize, well, maybe AI can play a role in helping humans perform better. And so then you can start looking discipline by discipline. Where can that be applied? Can that be applied to the person who's a a board operator, where they're looking at screens of data and alarms? Can we help provide recommendations for what to do in an instance where you're in some kind of transient condition where a person needs to intervene and take a specific action? Can it help a maintenance person decide which equipment to fix and when to fix it? So those are the types of problems that we want to address using AI. It's in effect trying to get to the heart of the human in the control loop and helping that human perform better. So once you identify those use cases of where you can generate some benefit, of course, the challenge is, how do you scale that? And how do you use it from site to site and across the enterprise? That's of course, a real challenge. And what I recommend is first start with the problems that we want to solve. And let's get that addressed at a site-by-site level and see how can we start improving human performance for board operators. How can we, for a set of alarms that appear, give a recommendation what to do? How can we help a process engineer determine why the yield or the throughput of the unit has declined, giving them a recommendation of what things to go and look at? And then similarly in maintenance, looking at what issues are occurring on pieces of equipment and then how to address that. So I would start at a site level and solve those problems first, and then start thinking about how you can bring that knowledge to the enterprise itself.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because I kind of didn't get anybody warmed up. We just went straight into it's this, amazing place where everything is entirely connected. So let's talk a little bit about scaling, if you will, because you do have some operators that are starting. And in the show, I promise our listeners, we're going to get to all of it. There's cyber we're going to talk about as well. But let's start with, if you don't mind, these large companies, the Exxon Mobils and the Chevrons. I'm not saying they're your customers, okay? I just want our listeners to understand these are the big guys, and they are no longer in futuristic. It's not still sitting on a draft table somewhere. They're pretty much integrated into using AI in all ways. I'm not saying they use it entirely, but it's no longer futuristic. It's actually operational. So, and you all have a lot of customers that are already in that space too. So you can always start with one, I guess, module, if you will. But I think the goal is, if you really want to be efficient, you're using all of the tools that you guys have for them to really be efficient, and for them to look at not just a single asset, but across the board. And in some ways, it helps them in so many different ways. It's not just efficiency, but efficiencies in different ways. So let me come back to, tell me how you're seeing companies stall versus how they scale up. Can you give me an example of how maybe a company was using it in and I don't want to be negative, but it gives, I guess, us an understanding of how you do kind of start small, but then you scale up. And what are some of the things that you see, best practices of how they stall because maybe they're not all connecting together? The difference.
Yeah. So let me try to give a few ideas as to how that's happening and what I have seen in practice. First place to get started, of course, is where can you make a difference in improving your business operations? So what's the problem to go and solve? Are you having issues maintaining your throughput at maximum throughput? Are you having issues with yield? Are your maintenance costs increasing? So understand where is the problem that you want to solve. And generally, when you start there with what is the problem and what is the opportunity, then you can put in place a program and define success, meaning that, can I solve my throughput or yield problem, which is largely addressed by humans making decisions that perhaps turn off the advanced control and optimization? Or can I reduce my maintenance costs by giving better insight into a maintenance person? Start with those problems first, and then work with the tools that are available, both deterministic and probabilistic in the AI space, to address that problem. Customers stall because they try AI as just a technology and say, let me approach this technology and see what it can do. If you start with the business problem and apply the technology, then you can determine whether or not you are driving success and business output. When that happens, then there's a desire to go and implement more technology in different areas. If you can get a great use case, then it moves on into different areas. And we've got a terrific customer example in the Middle East, a very large petrochemical supplier that was really hoping to move to high degree of autonomy, meaning they want to take their existing deterministic controls and augment it with additional artificial intelligence and other methods in order to run the units more precisely for longer periods of time. So they had a very specific mission in order to address that. And we were able to spend some time with them and show, here's how the state of the art can work. And here's how we can address human variation at their site by installing a new generation of automation that's informing the humans on the best practices to take. And in doing so, that improves the output of the plant. It's improving the throughput and improving the yield. And once you've demonstrated that, then there's a healthy enthusiasm for, well, where else can I apply this? Maybe I should move it to maintenance. Maybe I should use it for planning and scheduling. And so that's my recommendation. It's start with business problem and show how you can address that problem. That's where you can avoid the stalling that would otherwise occur, where you're just running lots of proofs of concept and trying to evaluate a technology. That's a little more problematic approach. So business problem first, apply the technology, demonstrate a benefit, and then move on to a different area.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we return, I want to talk about measuring the ROI beyond efficiency. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Jason Urso, who is the Vice President, Chief Technology Officer of Honeywell Industrial Automation. Jason, before the break, you're kind of describing what's pretty normal for the energy industry as far as they are clearly taking advantage of artificial intelligence and using it not only to maximize, I think, revenue, return, efficiencies, but there's also something to be said about safety, being able to detect equipment going down before it does. So there's just like a lot of reasons for companies to want to use some form of artificial intelligence and just being more efficient. Can we talk a little bit about measuring the ROI beyond efficiency? With the Control Room Assistant now commercially launched, y'all's product, what new KPIs, such as how to avoid the downtime, the predictability, accuracy, and operators' cognitive load reduction, should executives be tracking to qualify AI's true financial impact? And I mean, as an executive myself, I'm looking at these things, and I'm not talking about a control room. It earlier, it starts with one, and you're like realizing if AI can do this, it can do this, it can do this, it can do this, it can do this. Starts efficiencies, you start seeing reducing time, and you start looking at financial rewards. And this is what's happening in the Control Room Assistant as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at KPIs. And I think sometimes people start the AI conversation with how can I make humans more efficient, and therefore I can have less humans. And while that's just a little bit of the nature of automation over a long, long time, that's not the area that we're emphasizing. The area that we're emphasizing is how do we make people perform like experts regardless of their years of experience. And when they make expert decisions, it means that business results like greater level of throughput for longer periods of time, more sustained yields for longer periods of time, less unplanned downtime, are all benefits that start to appear. So in effect, it's assuring that every person is operating like a world-leading expert, making the best, most optimal decision for improving the plant operation and in turn improving the plant economics. So from my standpoint, the big prize to be had is around operational benefit, not reduction of staffing. It's improving the staffing's ability in order to make the right decision every time, and then be able to get big time benefits of throughput, yields, reliability, and certainly safety plays an important role here as well. If you have a page of alarms in front of you indicating that there's some condition that has gone wrong within the plant, now you're relying on human intellect to make a decision about what to do to keep the plant operating not just optimally, but within safe operating limits as well. An expert might know straight away what to do. A less than expert might have to call other people, use additional time in order to figure out what might be an urgent circumstance. What if there was an AI virtual expert sitting next to that more junior person making recommendations saying the last time these alarms occurred, the root cause of it was a piece of equipment that was degraded. You need to fail over to the backup piece of equipment, or you need to take this additional action in order to guide the process out of a process upset zone and back into normal operation. So not just are we getting better operational efficiency, we can provide guidance to the human to assure safe operation as well.
I think all of us understand that when we look at a plane and how we trust the pilot, but we also know they have all these wonderful controls and they're there for a reason. And we want the pilot to use it because we know that we're safer with all those controls and that the plane typically, helps fly itself. And so when you look at it, you're like, okay, yeah, use those controls to benefit us where we're obviously a little safer in flight. And it's similar to this. You have all this data being crunched at a millisecond versus our, human error. And it just makes for a better understanding of why you want that other resource there. And I think that when we look at energy, it hasn't always been the safest industry. And so I look at AI as it isn't just I'm glad you gave by the way, a great answer in saying it's not about getting rid of people. It's about making them better. And I like that answer. Go ahead, Jason.
What a great reference using the pilot. I'll build on that and talk about driving a car. So think about how we used to drive the car. The driving of the car was entirely us. We decided when to accelerate, when to brake, when to change lanes. Now cars are packed with sensors and analytics, and a modern car will tell you you're approaching a car in front of you too quickly in an unsafe way and alert you to that fact.
That's
and in
right.
fact, might even apply the brakes in order to prevent an accident. If you try to change lanes and it might cause an unsafe condition, it will alert you to that. And it will even correct the driving if the car is set in that way. In effect, what is happening in the world of automobiles is that you're helping the driver become even better. You're increasing their level of expertise by augmenting them with sensors and analytics and alarms and, in fact, recommendations on what to do. That's the same thing that we're trying to apply in the industrial space. It is to help take a more junior person and make them an expert by giving them guidance. So I've got a 16-year-old son who's a new driver, and I feel a little bit better knowing that his car is actually giving him guidance to help him operate the vehicle more safely as he's building up his experience in being a driver.
Absolutely. You said that really great. We're going to get ready for break. When we return, I want to, you discussed how, and I think everybody can understand with a plane or a car, all these new bells and whistles that we have, the technology that helps us become safer and better drivers, and has actually probably um, helped us in a lot of preventable car wrecks, if you will. I don't know about the planes because luckily there's not a lot of them that, have tragical endings. But nevertheless, I really want to kind of drill down on now that we're out of, okay, this is no longer a fantasy, it's being used. I want you to tell us a little bit about how these reactive alarms, how they work to help them understand these triggers that are going off. How do they make better decisions and very high stake type of decisions? Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Jason is it Urso?
Urso.
One more time?
Urso.
Urso.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been saying it wrong.
It's pretty close.
Okay. Jason Urso, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Honeywell Industrial Automation. Jason, before the break, you were kind of discussing the real reason why the technology is really a game changer in the way of how the industry has pretty much operated. And when we look at efficiencies, and we're not talking about removing people or people being laid off, but there's really also, it's efficiencies, but it's also really helping in the way of safety, and really helping catch junior people up to an executive level, or I wouldn't say executive level, a very experienced level person. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Traditional control rooms rely on reactive alarms. You hear it, when there's a big beep, beep, beep going off, there's a problem and it gets your attention as it's done by design. But Honeywell's AI suite is designed to anticipate abnormal situations before those alarms go off, which is what we probably always want. What type of high stakes decisions is the AI enabling operators to be more proactive in the control, engine room or in the control room? Tell us how and why this works to avoid those types of situations.
Absolutely. So let me take this in two parts. The first part is when an alarm occurs, how can we give advice as to what to do in that circumstance? Because an alarm is an indicator that something has gone wrong and it needs human intervention to address it. And then let me take the other part of it subsequently to talk about how do you avoid getting into a circumstance where the alarm has gone off. So first step is, how can AI be applied for a board operator who's looking at a set of screens and running the operations of the plant? Now, a set of alarms get presented to the operator. An experienced operator can probably detect the pattern of alarms and say, I've seen that before, and I know what to do about it. I need to take action A, B, and C. A less experienced person might not have seen that before and need to do some investigation, may need to ask somebody else. And in the process of doing so, often they will lower the output of the plant operation while they're trying to figure out what's actually going on. So where AI can play a role is that AI is an excellent pattern matcher. So if you think about the human brain, we detect a pattern, say we've seen it before and know what to do about it. AI can help do that as well. So a set of alarms appears to a person less junior. The AI can go and look in the historical archive and say, has this pattern of alarms or something similar happened in the past, any time in the past? And then what was the set of actions that was taken in order to address the problem? And then you can present it to the junior person and say, this pattern has happened before, and here were the set of actions that were taken. And this at least gives some guidance
And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. Jason, before the break, you were telling us about how operators really are now taking advantage of artificial intelligence. I'd like to say you all have announced, and y'all were very heavily presented at CERAWeek for your AI powered control room assistant. And so there was a lot of information that you guys had released. And one of the things you just mentioned was how these operators are now using these systems, your system, to actually detect systems down, better responses, faster responses. So therefore, they're better prepared in some, or how to anticipate abnormal situations. We also, though, in the energy industry, are very well aware that we have an aging workforce, and it's very hard in today's world to find really, I wouldn't say educated because they are, but really with a lot of experience under their belt as far as how fast things are accelerating. So I think the energy industry is dealing with a lot of new people coming into the workforce. And artificial intelligence is also really making a change in that place as well. So can you tell me with the, retirements accelerating, how is Honeywell using, AI to just digitize expert knowledge and not just for the training, but for also like real-time decision support on the plant floor? Because I think this is really a game changer of the model that they used to use versus the model they get to use now, thanks to artificial intelligence.
Yes, you're exactly right that we have in some parts of the world a demographic shift where there's more retirements that are happening, and therefore we're bringing in new workers that have less experience. So you see a 30 to 40-year expert go out the door and being replaced by a more junior person, maybe somebody even out of school that hasn't had the benefit of seeing a lifetime of operations and
Yeah.
different patterns that have happened within the plant environment, just knowing inherently when something happens what to do. And
Right.
similarly, in other parts of the world where there are new plant operations with people who have never worked in a plant environment to begin with, how do you get them trained and operating at peak performance as quickly as you can? Well, this is where artificial intelligence plays a very important role, because if we think about how we learned, often we learn by watching an expert and training under the guidance of an expert. And it can take years of time to achieve a reasonable level of expertise. Let's say it could take 10 years because you have to build up your knowledge base the same way the expert did.
Mhm.
Now, what if we could accelerate that with AI? What if when the expert retires, that expert's knowledge is captured in the form of models that AI can help recite at the appropriate point in time? So then you've got a junior person that is being guided by a virtual expert in the form of artificial intelligence. And this is where we think there is tremendous opportunity, because what might have taken 10 years to build up that person's expertise, now maybe after 2 or 3 years, coupled with a virtual expert, that person can perform as flawlessly as the 30 or 40-year expert. And this works great whether it's helping with retirements or helping in other parts of the world where there's a new plant and this is the first time that somebody is actually operating the unit. Of course, there's plenty of opportunity for training and simulation just to do the traditional style of education, but having that virtual expert next to you allows you to perform with greater degree of confidence and insight. And we think this is a way of accelerating expertise within our customers' plants.
Well, there is one thing, through CERAWeek that I did like hearing from you guys. And I think a lot of people, when we talk about artificial intelligence and it's moving so fast and not everybody understands what it is. And you just hear a lot of jargon out there that, they're going to replace the humans. You guys are very careful to keep the human in the loop autonomy, which you're, pretty much emphasizing that AI should augment but not replace the worker, which is a really, good thing to hear you guys saying that it's really not designed to run on its own. As we said earlier in the show, that it isn't about taking over and eliminating people. It's more about using them and training them and helping them to understand the systems better. Let's switch gears though and talk a little bit about cybersecurity. As AI expands, the attacks are now surfacing. And I know this was a big concern last year at CERAWeek. It was here again this year, not quite as much as AI because it's now here, it's in use. But you guys have rolled out advanced OT cyber offering. What does secured by design look like for an AI model? And directly, how does it influence plant operators?
Yeah. Yeah, well, cybersecurity is such a tough challenge today, in part because of artificial intelligence. For people who want to use the plant data, you need to have more data and more connectivity. And more data and more connectivity ultimately means there's more points of vulnerability that
Yeah,
attacker can try to exploit.
absolutely.
And
Mhm.
so the problem space has grown significantly. What's worse is that artificial intelligence itself can become a hacker. It can make a person with limited skills operate like a very expert hacker. So now you've got more vulnerability, you've got
Mhm.
threats increasing because the skill required to be a hacker is going down. So what to do about it? Well, what to do about it means we have to build more active capability inside of our control systems to identify vulnerabilities more quickly and address them, prioritize those vulnerabilities and focus the attention there, and put active monitoring in the systems looking for threats that are
Yes,
looming in your system.
I
Because
saw that. I saw that. That was, yeah.
we, we know that a successful cyber attack often begins with someone lurking within your system looking for
Mhm.
vulnerable spots. So if you can identify that faster, that's the way in order to address them. So Honeywell's introduced a full suite of active cybersecurity tools and technologies that work with our control systems and others that are identifying vulnerabilities faster, identifying threats in an active way, and making very specific recommendations as to what to do. So gone are the days where we can just use layered defense in depth. That's still a foundational principle, but it is insufficient to protect yourself. You have to have additional technologies, which, by the way, can also be powered by AI looking for certain patterns of abnormal behavior and making
Mhm.
a set of recommendations on what to fix and allowing people to do so more quickly.
Absolutely. Welcome back to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. Jason, before the break, we were discussing how Honeywell, this is a huge responsibility in the way of when we look at not only are you trying to, your Honeywell is automating, but as we discussed, there's always cybersecurity. And the difference between last year's CERAWeek and this year's CERAWeek was cybersecurity was so present there. It was like, we know you've got to hurry, you've got to implement right now, but you also have to be careful with cybersecurity. And so that was the year before. This year, as it wasn't as vocal as AI was, but at the same time, there's a lot to think about when you're talking about implementing things like this. So I want to talk about trust, explainability, and operator confidence because it's a huge risk moving into these environments, and yet they kind of have to. In the last 2 years, that has been what's come out of CERAWeek is you have to move in this direction and you better be careful. Um, and we've heard of incidences like Colonial Pipeline and stuff where we had problems. So operators, they must trust AI's recommendations, but how does Honeywell ensure transparency, explainability, and validation in the AI logical, decision logic? Because I know you said that you all are looking and these systems, but how do you all can you go a little further into how that they are confident that what you guys are using is one of the best in the business, that they don't have to worry about this as much?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just wrap up the cyber conversation. Is cyber has to be paramount in everything we do. So cyber is equal to safety now, and safety is
Mhm.
paramount in everything we do. And we need to make sure that we've got the right cyber fundamentals in place before we even try any of these techniques that we've been talking about with artificial intelligence. So then the other dimension is, of course, uh, how does someone have confidence that the recommendations being made by artificial intelligence are good ones? And are they sound? Should I follow them? That's where it's still important to have a human in the loop. These are recommendations. It still requires somebody to have the right level of training so they can look at a recommendation and say, does that make sense in my circumstance? So the way that we've approached artificial intelligence in the example that I gave a bit earlier is by not trying to derive some intelligence by looking at the circumstance and trying to make a decision based on it. It is to look at past history and saying, in the past, have these issues occurred? And if they have, what were the actions taken to remediate them? So in effect, we're just replaying what the same way an operator would use their own intellect and say, have I seen that pattern of alarms before? If so, what was the issue and what did I do about that? And then they have to go through the process of saying, is that the right approach to solve this problem? That's what AI is doing in this case. It is looking for past history where these problems have occurred and making a recommendation based on what someone has done in the past to remediate the problem. So that's how we're building a level of trust. But it doesn't end there because we want to build more and more knowledge over time. If that was the right recommendation, the operator can put a flag in it and say, that was a good recommendation. That helped me. If that was the wrong recommendation, the operator can say, nope, this one wasn't quite right in my circumstance, and can flag it as such. And in doing so, we continue to build the knowledge base in the system about which recommendations are better than others. And so that's the way we're starting to approach it. Not to mention, in the other use case where we talked about predicting out in the future, well, there's an example of using a combination of deterministic science, where we're using process models and simulation to predict where we'll be in the future, coupled with probabilistic science and saying, here's some recommendations to get you to a better place. But here again, still requires human intervention and intellect to make sure that those are the right recommendations for the circumstance.
Well, I want to talk about resilience against a compromised AI system because the possibility is there. So if an AI model was ever manipulated or corrupted, what safeguards exist to prevent incorrect recommendations from impacting critical operations? And I'm sure you have that, but just wanted to go over it for our listeners, but also we have energy folks that listen too. I think that everybody wants to be reassured, okay, we have a stopgap, hard gap, no matter something bad happens, something's going to happen. Uh, so
Yeah,
what are those in place for potential manipulation or something that got corrupted by through that?
yeah. Certainly within process control, there are always layers of protection that are in place for safety reasons. Everything from the control system and the set of limits that are on the control system that try to prevent errant recommendations going into the system to all the way down to safety systems preventing very harmful actions from having an impact. So there are those safeguards that are always in place to address even human errors that could be made or equipment faults that happen to occur. So what about with artificial intelligence? This is where human in the loop is still so vital. We need to make sure that we're training people to make sure that they are capable of operating the unit without the recommendation. It's no different than my 16-year-old example that I gave earlier. He needs to be properly trained to operate the vehicle, and the AI is providing some additional advice to operate it better. And so similarly within the process plants, the process operator still needs to have a proper level of training and treat the AI as a recommendation, not a mandate. And this will be very important to avoid complacency and saying, well, I got a recommendation, surely that's right. The first instinct should be, is that recommendation sensible for my circumstance? And so it's helping the person by providing some guidance and advice, but it is still up to the person to make the best decision in the circumstance.
I'm going to ask you one last question. You've got, less than a minute to answer it, though. The future. I mean, you all are working on how this will continue to shape throughout the next couple of years. And it would seem as though not only are you all and companies creating all of this artificial intelligence for exploration companies to use, but how fast do we see this technology changing? What does 5 years from now look like for an oil and gas operator?
Yeah, it's the great news is that the future has arrived. It's just
It's here.
not been fully deployed. And so I think things will change very rapidly. Now, we talk about moving towards levels of autonomy, both in the vehicle space and also within the process space. For a fixed process plant, autonomy doesn't mean zero people. It means people making the best decisions and best operation. But when you start talking about offshore operations where you don't want to put people in harm's way, you don't want people in locations that are very difficult to stay for a length of time, we truly are moving towards levels of autonomy in those spaces. We're moving towards levels of autonomy in mining where there's significant levels of distributed assets. And so I think we're on a journey with a different pace per industry, but a journey towards autonomous operation.
Very good. Jason, thank you for joining me and shedding light on how AI is reshaping the industrial operation from the control room to the enterprise level. Thank you for joining me on the Energy Mixx Radio Show.
Great to be here.